What's a really effed up thing you've witnessed as a kid but didn't realize until you were older? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My mother used to drive home from the hospital she worked at high as balls from the morphine she had stolen and then crawl into my bed and pass out. I used to scream at my dad to come get her out of my room so I could finish my homework and go to sleep for school the next day. It's a miracle the woman didn't kill anyone on her drives home. I had a friend who molested his little sister in front of me when we were around 7 or 8 and told me I could take a turn next. I left immediately, never went back, and never told anyone. I thought it was bad, but I had no idea I was seeing one of the worst crimes known to man. I still feel so much regret that I didn't tell anyone, but at that age I was kind of shocked and traumatized by just being there. I'm so sorry I let you down, Amy. I'm a teacher now, and I have had a near perfect record of recognizing kids who really needed to see a counselor. I'm trying my best to make sure it never happens again if I'm around. Just telling this story is killing me inside. When I was 8, I took care of my father in home who was dying of AIDS. Mom wasn't in the picture. None of the adult family wanted to be near him and help out because they all said it was contagious. This was the 90s and HIV ignorance was still at an all-time high. I changed his diapers, showered him, fed him, gave him his pills until he died. As a kid, that was my normal. I didn't realize it at the time, but it really effed me up. He was my hero and the strongest man alive to me, and seeing him in such a vulnerable state and reduced to nothing really messed up my brain. It just kind of numbed me. Literally did not or could not cry for 12 whole years after that. I still struggle nowadays to feel what I'm supposed to feel in certain situations, but I've gotten a lot better and am definitely more in touch with my emotions. It was in my after-school activity center, and we were all out for a walk with the teachers, and I remember witnessing a lady laying face down in front of an apartment building entrance and a broken window above. There was a lot of blood. The adult just kept on pushing us to walk by her. I remember questioning it and asking to help her. I think maybe they didn't want us to look at the scene too much. My mom would spend the entire day on the computer in AOL chat rooms talking to her friend while Dad was at work. She was so glued to the computer that my siblings and I could walk in rooms and yell things at her trying to get her attention, and she wouldn't even notice us. We took care of ourselves. I was like 10 at the oldest, and I was forced to bottle feed my baby brother during this time and take care of him because my mom just wouldn't otherwise. What I really hate is that I'm pretty sure I told my dad that I was having to be his caretaker, and he didn't do anything to make the situation better for me. I don't know if he knew she was having the emotional affair or not, but how could he not have? Anyway, one day, my mom decided we were going to leave my dad while he was at work so she could just run off and be with this friend. She took myself and my 5 younger siblings while my dad was at work and drove us on a cross-country road trip from Nevada to Ohio to surprise her online lover, who was also married. And once we got to Ohio and she told him we were there, he freaked and ghosted her, shocker. At the time, the situation was confusing for me because my siblings and I just wanted to go home. It clicked later that my mom has always been a very emotionally unstable person, and my siblings and I all have heavy trauma now as adults because of it. My mom's cousin was raised by my grandparents, and I would stay there often. I was 7 to 8. Back in the day, I think it was HBO or something would show porn after a certain time at night. He would only let me watch TV at night if it was on that channel in his room, and then after I was done watching the movie, the porn would start playing. He wouldn't be in the room, but he would check to make sure I didn't change the channel. I would get weirded out and just turn the TV off. It was so weird because he wouldn't say anything, but insist I could only watch that channel at night. It also had to be loud enough that he could hear it outside the room. He would also leave his porn magazines open and laying around in his room when I would sleep over, and then ask me to get his stuff in his room that were right by the magazines. I remember asking my mom why I didn't have hair like the girls in his magazine, and she lost her mind. He lied and said I was snooping and that he caught me looking at porn on TV. My mom didn't believe him, and my grandfather canceled the cable and had him move to the efficiency that they had. He was super mad at me and barely spoke to me after that. I couldn't understand why he was mad because I never told on him, and I felt like I had done something wrong. My dad grabbing a knife while punishing my brother. Dad had him sit at the kitchen table and ordered him to put his hand on the table. Dad then put the knife edge on one of my brother's thumbs and threatened to cut his thumb off. Can't remember what it was about, but this caused me to fear my father from a very young age. My brother was only around 9 or 10 years old at the time. When I was in elementary school, I became close friends with a family that had children similar in age to me. I only ever saw them at school with their mom and my dad. The oldest daughter and son couldn't stand me, and I never knew why. So I would cry and talk to my dad about it, and he would reassure me that they did in fact like me. During this time, we had a landline at the house, and I happened to pick it up one day and heard my dad on the other line with the mom of that family. He was talking about giving her roses and spending time with her. When I asked my dad who that was, because it clearly wasn't my mom, he disconnected all the landlines in the house. Turns out, he was absolutely cheating on my mom with this woman, and I was inadvertently involved by becoming their friends. It was a pretty shit situation in the end. My dad and I were at an air show in Toronto in the 90s. We watched this huge plane go up and do a maneuver and then go into a dive, going nose first into the lake with a massive splash. My dad was a photographer and had managed to capture the seconds before and after impact and told me we had to go right away. He booked it to the newspaper with the film roll to get it developed. I said I wanted to watch the rest of the show because I thought it had just dropped a bomb and flown off. Didn't realize that I just witnessed 7 people die. I was once at one of those birthday parties in McDonald's late 90s as a young child. There was another party going on the opposite side of the restaurant, so it was pretty chaotic with kids running around everywhere and only a small amount of adults to corral them. There was a man wearing a red t-shirt and blue jeans sitting and eating kinda close to the other party, which was odd in itself because most adults that were coming in were getting their food and getting out of the noise of 20 plus screaming kids as fast as possible. I only remember him because looking back on it a little while later, I saw him leaving the McDonald's with a kid from the other party. The kid wasn't struggling or anything, but the man was kind of rushing him out. In my kid brain, I assumed it was his dad or whatever, but a couple days later, my parents found out through mutual friends that there was an attempted kidnapping in the McDonald's we were at. I don't know if this is true, but part of me feels like I witnessed the attempted kidnapping. Thank God they caught the guy, and the kid was okay, and because of that incident, my parents lectured my brother and I heavily on stranger danger. My mother's second husband coming into my room and running his hand up my legs slowly, then suddenly standing up and walking out. Then after he was kicked out, coming to my school bus stop, I was the only one who got on there and acting really weird. Realized a few years ago, guy was trying to molest me and almost kidnap me. My mother was a drug addict. As a kid, lots of things happened as a result of it, but one thing I didn't realize at the time that would stick with me, well, probably forever, but at least thus far, is when my sister's childhood best friend's father committed suicide, and my mother brought my sister and I to their house a couple of nights later. The funeral hadn't even happened yet, to break in and steal things to sell for her drug money. Ugh. She said at the time that she had permission to do so. She didn't. She just wanted to rob a dead man and brought us along to help carry things. I still feel guilty about it. My friend had a lock on the outside of her bedroom door. I thought it was weird, but didn't really think much about it. It turned out her parents would literally lock her in her room for long periods of time as punishment. My older brother overdosing. Always thought it was normal. Throughout my life, I'm 20. I've saved him from dying maybe 3 times I can remember. Always put him inside, never called the cops. All of my brothers and sisters have seen it happen. If he were to die tomorrow, I don't think I could cry, as I've cried too many times over his death, and he ended up living. He's still alive, currently in a sober home. Good luck. When I was a kid, all the kids would sleep in the basement on Christmas Eve to give space for Santa to drop off the presents. That night, there was a lot of noise coming from outside on the street, but we couldn't see anything because there was snow covering the egress windows. My mom came downstairs and told us to stay there, but soon we heard sirens and saw police lights reflecting in the snow. There was a lot of commotion that we couldn't see. Then my dad came downstairs with the very real Santa Claus. He told us that his sleigh crashed in the snow and that the kind police officers were helping him get unstuck. And while they were working, he was visiting the kids in the neighborhood. He pulled out a present for each of us and sat with my family while we opened them and sang a few Christmas songs. When things calmed down outside, he went back to delivering toys. Years later, I learned that there was a large gang fight outside of our house and that a few people died right outside. An older man from our church lived down the road, and knowing my parents had undoubtedly scared children at home, put on his Santa suit and came over once the police arrived. Santa was a hero to me as a child, but that man is a hero to me now. Lived in a townhouse. In my bedroom at night, I would hear the kids next door scream and cry. My parents called the police once, but the man claimed he was playing with his kids and didn't let them in, and apparently the police couldn't do anything. Found out when I was older that the man had later tried to kill the whole family, kids, baby included, with a pair of scissors. I saw a small child being smothered under a sort of beanbag giant soft plaything, face down in an indoor play area sandpit. Other very small children were all playing and jumping on it without realizing someone was under it, myself included. I was about 5, and the rest of the children were the same age or younger. After some time, an adult noticed and pulled him out unconscious. A woman was screaming, presumably the mother, and I remember the kid being worked on by a doctor or paramedic, I'm guessing. I remember my dad asking me very calmly if I saw what happened. I'm actually too afraid to bring this up with my parents because I have no idea if the kid died or not, or how that might have affected them all these years, as it's never been brought up. For whatever reason, it's been on my mind lately. When I was 6 or maybe 7, it was around my birthday, I saw a girl get hit by a car. We lived in a small town where the elementary, middle, and high schools were all together, so all grade levels rode the buses together, and all the buses had to go down the same road to get to the school. The bus in front of mine stopped so a girl could cross the street and get on. I watched her start to cross the street. I watched the car come over the hill, slide on the stones. It was a dirt road. I watched it hit her body, and I watched the blood sink into the dirt. Her backpack came open and her shoes came off. One landed near my window. It wasn't until after the police had gotten there and were covering up her body that one of the older kids noticed me watching and moved me to the other side where I couldn't see. I never mentioned that I saw it to anyone and just kind of moved on. Like 10 years later in a forensics class, we were talking about car accidents, and it sort of brought the whole thing to the surface. When I was 9 or 10, my family and I lived on the first floor of an apartment complex in Colorado. That year, we had a particularly snowy winter. Every day following snow, 2 to 3 times per week, the groundskeeper for the complex would make his rounds, cheerily using a snowblower to clear each and every path. I'd wave hi whenever I saw him pass by my bedroom window. After one especially heavy snowfall, the groundskeeper was walking along clearing the snow when, just outside my room, when something got caught and obstructed the snowblower. I saw him struggle with the machine for a moment and then walk in front of it. He bent over to look, and when he reached his hand in, a splattering of blood hit my window with such force that I'll never forget the sound. We called 911, but his hand was gone. Luckily, it was just his hand. He left the job shortly after, and I never saw him again, but I'll never forget the sound of the blood hitting my window. When I was around 5 or 6, my dad was poor AF and lived in these really shitty apartments where most of the tenants were on drugs. I had to go stay with him on the weekends, and sometimes we'd visit his friends downstairs who had a 13 or 14-year-old daughter they'd stick me with. On this particular day, she had a friend over, and her friend was telling the story about purposefully drowning her little brother and then pretending to be broken up about it on the news like she had nothing to do with it, laughing about how stupid her mom was for believing her. It did scare me at the time because I was scared of her in general due to how mean or erratic she was, but I thought it was a joke. In retrospect, I really do think this girl may have drowned her brother. Living in an abusive situation as a whole. As a child, domestic violence was the norm for me. When I was at a friend from elementary school one time and his parents were having a disagreement over something, I asked my friend when they'd start hitting each other, and he just looked at me funny, not getting what I meant. As an adult, looking back on my childhood, it's only then that you really understand how effed up it all was. As a child, it's intense and frightening, but you don't yet grasp the full situation yet. My parents fighting, whoever was losing would say to me, "If I'm going to run away and kill/drown myself if Mummy, Daddy don't stop shouting, I can't take it anymore," and then proceed to leave the house. They're both still alive, and in hindsight, I don't know if they ever meant what they said now, but I'm about to have a child of my own. I can't ever imagine doing that to a child, let alone my own child. Once, when I was like 7 or 8, my biological dad left me in his car while he went to buy drugs. He then proceeded to take all the cocaine and heroin he bought and told me it was medicine. I realized later what he was really doing. Cross-posting this comment from another question last year that was similar. My mom would sometimes have us play a game called Army, which consisted of me, my mom, and my siblings army crawling around our apartment, kind of a hide-and-seek style game. She would yell, "Hit the deck!" randomly, and we would all drop and find a hiding spot. We would giggle and giggle while my mom army crawled around looking for us. We loved that game so much. I realized a few years ago, while retelling the story, that we lived in a really terrible neighborhood, and she would yell it out when she heard gunshots outside the building. I'm assuming she was worried about stray bullets.